and more, her dreams became emphatic in that respect, namely that I was a sort of child, and she is a very little, frail human thing, you know, and quite a little girl in the hands of an enormous being. And the last dream of that series was, I cannot tell you all the dreams, was that it was out in nature. I stood in a field of wheat, an enormous field of wheat that was ripe for harvest. And I was a child. And I held her in my arm like a baby. And the wind was blowing over that field of wheat. Now you know, when the wind is blowing over wheat field, these waves in the wheat field. Yes. And with these waves, I swayed like that, putting her as if it were to sleep, you know. And she felt as being in the arms of a God, of the Godhead. And I thought, now the harvest is ripe. Yes. And I must tell her. And I told her, you see, what you want and what you project into me, because you are not conscious of it, is you have the idea of a deity. You don't possess. Therefore you see it in me. Yeah. That clicked. She suddenly became aware of an entirely heathenish image. Yes. That comes fresh from the archetype. She had not the idea of a Christian God or of an Old Testament Yahweh. It was a heathenish God, you see, a God of nature, of vegetation. He was the wheat himself. He is the spirit of the wheat, the spirit of the wind. And she was in the arms of that Newman. No. Now, that is the living experience of an archetype. Now, that made a tremendous impression upon that girl, and instantly it clicked. She saw what she really was missing, that missing value, that was in the form of a projection in myself and made myself indispensable to her. Yes. And then she saw it is not indispensable, because it is, as the dream says, she is in the arms of that archetypal idea. Now that is a numinous experience, you see. And that is the thing that people are looking for. Yes. An archetypal experience that gives them an incorruptible value. You see, they depend upon other conditions, they depend upon their desires, their ambitions, depend upon other people, because they have no value in themselves. They have nothing in themselves. They are only rational, and they are not in the possession of a treasure that would make them independent. But when that girl can hold that experience, then she doesn't depend anymore. She cannot depend anymore, because that value is in herself. And that is a sort of liberation. Yes. And that is, of course, makes her complete, you know. Inasmuch as she can reach such a luminous experience, she is able to continue her path, her way, her individuation. The acorn can become an oak and not a donkey.
If you have a relationship to C.G. Jung, then you have to work on it, and the meaning is a result, perhaps, you see. One can say I projected on him a father, but I also projected on him a mother, you see. And the one who accepted me, I could say. And from this, in the course of the years, I found a place in this world. I found a place in myself and in the world. A transference is a projection. Yes. So I projected on him this and that, and he took it seriously, and he acted accordingly. But he never laughed at it. He accepted it. He accepted it.
I remember once a patient wanted to marry Jung. She was convinced that he was the man for her and for her lifetime. In vain, Jung explained to her that he already was married. She continued to be convinced, and therefore Jung accepted. She went on, prepared a marriage deal, had printed cards, everything was ready. Jung continued to accept in full confidence of unconscious reactions coming from the patients or from him. And the day before the planned marriage, he got an express letter from the patient telling him that this night God had told her that unhappiness, the marriage would not be possible. The patient came out of her psychosis, had always in her memory this event, and was completely balanced afterwards. That's how Jung handles the transference situation as a full reality, and having fully confidence in the unconscious, which would lead the patient and himself through a seemingly difficult situation.
You could see what every woman was really substantially like, and helped her to find her main interest: literature, politics, psychotherapy, or astrology, or what she wanted. He had an art to follow a person until she found herself. And the value of transference was great for Jung himself.
It really was as if he was always inside of your unconscious, and not trespassing, but because he has been wherever one was, and so he knew how to be safe. He also would never use any of his terms, ever. My last interview, I told him a dream, and I realized, my God, that man is 85 years old. And it was pages of dream, and so I only told him half the dream, thinking I can't put that all on him. And so then he started. You know, he didn't ask you for one association. Very seldom he did. He just started to talk. And I was kind of not making the connection which what he was talking about had anything to do with my dream, but I knew better that I will find the connection if I listen eventually. And suddenly he said, "Oh, that is as if you dream," and he told me the second part of my dream, which I hadn't told him.
After about 2 years, I had a dream in which Jung had died. And I was in his house in the antechamber where he was laid up. And I paced up the room, very depressed, very unhappy. And suddenly my feeling changed, as if I pulled up my socks and, oh, all right, he's dead now, as far as to go on and work. I told Jung that dream, and he said, well, all right, now you can see patients. You're ready to see patients.
One didn't see it, but one felt it, that a ray of his spirit was falling onto us. And one was terribly spoiled, because compared with this, as a man, we are no more so interesting.
Yes, that must have been a problem. And
I must say, besides one's own husband.
Well, you were married. And
I was married.
You
Yeah.
had a deep relationship. And
Yes.
how did your husband feel? Did he ever feel jealous of you?
Clear. All our husbands, the husbands of our women around, were very jealous.
Yes.
But since then you understand that Jung was not falling into the traps and wishes of the women, so they had not to be really jealous, because Jung never misused his position and all these transferences.
Now, Jung worked in this rejected feminine world of the unconscious for years. People came to him. He was particularly successful with women patients. And one person came into his life very early on, because she's already with Jung and Emma Jung at the famous conference in Vienna, where they are all photographed together. And that is Tony Wolff.
Well, all I can say is that, of course, she was a most extraordinary person, there's no doubt about that, and she was a great help to Jung, too. I mean, when it comes to psychological types, for instance, she played a very important part there.
In his development of his ideas.
He had all this knowledge in philosophy and so on and so forth. And she had been one of his patients to begin with.
I see.
Oh, yeah. And I remember very, he was very proud of the fact that he had succeeded in curing her.
A lot of people who knew her said that they despaired of her ever recovering from whatever her psychological disturbance was. I think one must accept that it was profound enough to fit the rare, exceptional spirit she was, because in a sense, the rarer, the more exceptional the spirit, the deeper the psychological suffering. And Jung managed to bring her out of this, so that by the time of the famous Vienna conference, she was already an integrated working personality. And to me, that photograph is very moving, because the one who looks young, as if she's just been born, is Tony Wolff. She sits there with these large eyes. Jung had an instinct at what was wrong with life, what made life tear apart, made it incomplete, was because the feminine was rejected, driven insane, driven mad by a world of men, rejected by a masculine-dominated world. And that time when he let himself go, and when he landed deep down in what he came to call the collective unconscious, all this rejected feminine in himself confronted him.
Tony Wolff was being analyzed by Jung. When Jung started to have his active imagination, it really got going, and he got rather unstable. And that Tony Wolff simply said that she wasn't going to go on with her analysis with him, and that she was going to have a relationship with him. And more or less, I gather, took him by the ear and did so.
In this unfamiliar, terrifying underground of the collective unconscious, she was Jung's guide, to such an extent that she lived with him. And she took over the whole of the burden. And of course the tensions caused by that in Zurich and in the family must have been tremendous.
She reflected his anima in a way that Mrs. Jung didn't.
It was she who introduced him to all the Eastern things, Eastern spirituality, Eastern philosophy, and so on.
They were lovers, I take it?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Emma knew of their relationship, but she didn't wish to divorce you.
Oh, good gracious, no. It would never have entered her head.
Yes.
I mean, that wouldn't have been done. I mean,
that's rather unusual.
No, I don't think so. Not at that time. I mean, I don't even think nowadays. I mean, she had 4 children, and I don't think that Jung would have wanted a divorce at all.
Well, perhaps this isn't really relevant, but not many women will countenance open infidelity.
Please forgive me. I am not so sure if that is not a kind of British, maybe even English prejudice, conditioning. or something. I think that...
it's an American one, too.
Is it?
Tony Wolff, he couldn't have made it because she had breaks in a way, and she was stopping him always when he had a temperament where he was losing himself completely and without boundaries. And Tony Wolff stopped him and always brought him back to reality, and that was tremendously important for you.